And the first thing that jumps out is the age range. It's actually much wider than many people assume. Yeah, you have teenagers like the 15-year-old at Oxford High, but you also have a 43-year-old. So this isn't exclusively a problem of troubled high school students.
Now this right here, this is where it gets really chilling. Look at the consistency of the warning signs. I mean, in case after case, there were clear signals beforehand. At Oxford High, a really disturbing drawing was found that same morning. At Virginia Tech, faculty had already flagged the shooter as a major concern. The Columbine killers documented their plans for over a year, and just before the Covenant School attack, the shooter sent a message saying, "I'm planning to die today."
And this quote just brings it all into sharp focus. These weren't just abstract warning signs. This was a direct cry for help, written down hours before 4 students were killed. And what's more, the shooter's parents were actually called to the school that day, but they refused to take their son home.
So the crucial point here is that these were almost never impulsive acts. The source material shows this pattern of meticulous, detailed planning. The attackers at Columbine and the Covenant School planned for years. Others documented their intentions, their fascination with past massacres, all online. And in so many cases, the people closest to them noticed these really unsettling changes in their behavior beforehand.
And let's just start with this number, 177. That's the total number of people killed across just the major school shootings detailed in our source material. It's a stark figure, and it really frames the human cost of what we're about to break down.
This timeline really maps out these grim milestones over nearly 60 years. You know, each one became a turning point. The 1966 UT Tower shooting, that literally led to the creation of the first SWAT teams. Columbine in '99 completely changed how we think about school security. Virginia Tech is still the deadliest of its kind by a single gunman. The horror of Sandy Hook was just amplified by the incredibly young age of the victims. Uvalde sparked a firestorm over police inaction. And of course, the Nashville shooting shows this pattern is tragically far from over.
Okay, let's transition to the events themselves. How are these attacks actually carried out? Well, the data reveals some really clear patterns in the choice of weapons and a frankly terrifying trend in the speed of the violence.
When you look through the incidents in our source, the same types of weapons come up again and again. You have AR-15 style rifles, like the ones used at Marjory Stoneman Douglas and Sandy Hook, and you have high-capacity semi-automatic handguns, like those at Virginia Tech. They just appear over and over. And here's a critical detail that emerges from the reporting. These weapons were often obtained legally. The source notes that the attackers at Umpqua, Virginia Tech, and the Covenant School all legally purchased some or all of the guns they used.
Now, let's look at the timeline because this is startling. Our baseline starts way back in 1966 with the UT Tower shooting. This was a prolonged siege. For 96 minutes, a sniper terrorized the campus from above.
Okay, fast forward 33 years. The duration shrinks. At Columbine High School, the attack was more mobile, more chaotic, and it unfolded over about 49 minutes. Still a long time, but much shorter. By 2018, the lethality is just horrifically condensed. At Marjory Stoneman Douglas, the deadliest high school shooting in U.S. history was carried out in just 6 minutes as the shooter moved through 3 floors of the school. 6 minutes. And then there's Sandy Hook in 2012. The attacker killed 20 first graders and 6 adults in less than 5 minutes. This progression shows this horrifying acceleration in the speed and, frankly, the efficiency of the violence. So what happens in the immediate aftermath? Well, the response from law enforcement has evolved dramatically, and so has the accountability for both the attackers and, in some cases, even their families. This slide shows the two ends of that evolution perfectly. The 1966 UT Tower siege, where police and even armed citizens had to kind of improvise a response, that directly spurred the creation of specialized SWAT teams. Now, fast forward to 2022 in Uvalde, where a 77-minute delay by trained, equipped officers was condemned as a catastrophic failure. It just shows you how much the expectations for police response have changed.
And what about the perpetrators themselves? Across the 14 individuals detailed in the sources, the outcome is, well, it's often fatal. Exactly half ended their own attacks by suicide. About a third were arrested, and just over 20% were killed by police.
209. That's how many people were killed in just the 13 events we're analyzing today, from the UT Tower shooting all the way back in 1966 to the Covenant School in 2023. It's a really stark number and a devastating reminder of the human cost we're talking about. Okay, so who are the individuals behind these attacks? You know, when you start to dig into it, a really disturbing picture begins to emerge. And what you find is that these horrible acts of violence, well, they were often preceded by some very clear, very visible warning signs. Just take a look at this. It's pretty eye-opening. You have Jeff Weiss, who was posting on neo-Nazi websites. Adam Lanza was obsessed with tracking previous shootings. Audrey Hale left behind these incredibly detailed notebooks planning everything out. The big takeaway here is that these attacks, they almost never come out of nowhere. They're usually the final step after a long and sometimes very observable downward spiral. And think about how explicit some of these cries for help can be. The thoughts won't stop, help me. I mean, wow. Those were the exact words on a drawing found on Ethan Crumbley's desk just hours before he carried out his attack. School officials had actually met with his parents about it that very morning. So when you pull it all together, a clear profile starts to emerge. We're talking about a combination of things that show up again and again. A history of mental health struggles, social isolation, this dark fascination with past violence, really detailed planning, and the one crucial piece, access to firearms, which are often owned by their own families. All right, so we've talked about the attackers, but what about the attacks themselves? The data shows these chilling patterns in where they happen, how fast they unfold, and the tactics they use to hurt as many people as possible. So where are these attacks happening? It's pretty evenly split between high schools and universities. Each accounts for about 38% of the events we looked at. And what's just so tragic is that elementary schools are the target in nearly a quarter of these cases. And this is one of the most terrifying things to understand, the speed. The entire attack at Sandy Hook was over in less than 5 minutes. At Stoneman Douglas, it was about 6 minutes. The deadliest part of the Virginia Tech shooting lasted just 10 minutes. This kind of brutal speed makes it an absolute nightmare for law enforcement to respond to. Which, of course, brings us to the response itself. As we look at these events over the decades, you can see this painful evolution in police tactics. And it's a story marked by both some really critical lessons learned and some absolutely devastating failures. You can see this stark contrast right here. Columbine, back in 1999, completely rewrote the playbook. The old protocol was contain and wait. After Columbine, the new protocol became go in immediately, engage the threat. But then, 23 years later at Robb Elementary, that protocol wasn't followed. The commander on scene made the call to wait for over an hour. It was a decision later called the wrong decision, and it had catastrophic results. And when you look at other key moments, you see this mix of progress and failure. The UT Tower shooting in 1966, that literally led to the creation of the first SWAT teams. Huge change. But then, decades later at Virginia Tech, there was a failure to simply lock down the campus after the first shooting. We even see this disparity in individual actions, from the incredibly quick and effective response at the Covenant School to the tragic inaction of the officer at Stoneman Douglas, who just stayed outside. So, what happens after? The aftermath. The ripples from these events go on for years. They permanently change laws, they change communities, and they change the entire national conversation. You know, you can almost trace a direct line from each tragedy to some kind of societal shift. Virginia Tech led to changes in background check reporting. Sandy Hook kicked off this massive debate on gun control. And after Parkland, it was the students themselves who organized and created the March for Our Lives movement. It seems like every tragedy forces a new response. And in the wake of the Oxford High School shooting, we saw a huge legal shift. 10 to 15 years. That's the prison sentence for each of Ethan Crumbley's parents. It was a landmark case. For the very first time, parents were held criminally responsible, setting a powerful and completely new precedent for accountability. And the scars these events leave behind, they aren't just emotional or legal. They're physical. Buildings like Sandy Hook Elementary and Cole Hall at Northern Illinois University, they were completely torn down. The communities decided that the only way to truly heal was to erase the place where the horror happened and start over. It just shows you the depth of the trauma. So, all of this leaves us with one final crucial question. After all these years, after so much tragedy, we've seen these patterns of warning signs and rapid violence repeat themselves. And while the responses and the laws have evolved, you have to ask yourself, are the changes really enough to finally break the cycle?